going to share my presentation. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction, Corey, and hello and welcome to everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about a disposable society and protecting our natural environment. Okay, so here's the agenda for my talk today. All of the themes are surrounding the topic of litter, and there's going to be some insight at the end as to how we can actually make a difference as individuals or as a group doing litter picks. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly introduce myself and my background. I've always been very conscious of the environment, caring for the environment and trying to make a difference. I think my actual experience with litter picking is only very recent, and I think I'm going to be very proactively discussing how we can be doing a very small act and how much of a big influence it can have. Okay, so I'm 22 years old. I've very recently moved to Bedford, and this is where I'm working from home as a digital marketing intern. One thing that I found is that in Bedford, there was quite a lot of litter around my surrounding areas, quite a shocking amount of litter actually, and it was something that I intended to make a difference about. This led me to applying to become a litter ambassador for Bedford and surrounding areas. Which just gives me a little bit of grounding and a community that I can reach out to in terms of advice, and also just getting a bit more grounding and creating a community in Bedford that's passionate about it and wants to make a difference. So I very quickly wanted to just highlight the fact that when I was initially reached out to, it was through my alias Sustainable Skater on Instagram. This isn't a topic I'm actually going to be delving into that deeply today, but I just wanted to make an important note that it's skating that really showed me the full extent of Bedford and also the litter problem that we have, that it's really unseen and it's everywhere. And also that there are going to be some initiatives that I'm working on alongside the Bedford initiatives that are going to be going towards the skate community and just trying to involve them in also sustainable efforts and litter picking as a whole. So yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so I wanted to give a very quick snapshot, basically giving us an understanding of what the litter problem is like in the UK at the moment, just before we discuss the unseen impacts. Actually defining litter. Litter is an umbrella term that refers to all of the waste materials that are left in either public or undesirable places. This has a very far-reaching extent, so I was very surprised to actually find out both banana skins and orange peels and things along those lines, even if they're naturally based, are still classed as litter if they're in a public place. This is because if they're not degraded or composted properly, they still take around 2 years to 2.5 years to biodegrade, and ultimately that's going to be undesirable in the kind of public eye. There are also more than 2 million pieces of litter that are dropped every single day in the UK, and this is also costing the taxpayer over £1 billion per year to fund. It is our problem that is costing us over £1 billion. There's a disconnect with the public's understanding and also efforts to kind of preventing it. Okay, so a lot of people don't know if it's actually that bad. I'm here to argue that it is, quite clearly, and that we all need to take some action. But I wanted just to let you know that the litter problem has actually, since the 1960s, every single year has been a progressive, negative kind of increase in our litter, whether it's been production or whether it's just the amount that we're finding as litter pickers and then being able to kind of mark. So this is a problem that's progressively getting worse. And now people are progressively more aware of it. Over 55% of the UK populace deems litter to be a problem. So why is nobody doing anything about it? Why is it that the council and this sort of thing, why is the blame is usually given to someone else, or we don't take our own personal responsibility because we didn't drop the litter? This is the mindset that needs to change, and I'm here to try and show you over the next few slides the negative impacts on both our natural environment, our impact as humans, why we need to change this. Okay, so the impact on our natural environment. In all honesty, I could be going on for hours and hours, and I won't be able to touch even a fraction of the impacts, negative impacts that pollution and litter have on our natural environment, just within the UK, that is. I'm only able to touch on 2 areas. I've kind of done a general figure as to there are over 5,000 calls every single year to the RSPCA, just one of the UK animal charities. And ultimately, this will be a minuscule percentage of the animals that are killed and maimed every single day by litter, or that mistakenly consume it, or the other ill effects from pollutants. We will never know the true figure as to which animals and how many animals are thoroughly affected or truly affected by litter. But we can quantify some of the cigarette butt issues that are kind of just very prevalent. I wanted to bring up cigarette butts as it's a piece of litter that I myself have been guilty of throwing in the past, and I'm trying to make an effort to not do so any longer, whether it's, you know, carrying a small personal ashtray with you where you go, or whether that's buying biodegradable resources and materials like papers and filters that are then not going to be as much of an issue. It's something that we all have to take a step in kind of improving. Unfortunately, cigarette butts are also one of the worst things to pick up as a litter picker. It's not a particularly nice thing to have to sweep, and I know that a lot of people would steer away from wanting to do so. But I just wanted to highlight how much of an issue cigarette butts were. Around 800,000 tonnes of cigarette butts are generated globally every single year, and they also contribute to the problem of toxic microplastics that are consumed by animals and also seep into our waterways and are consumed ultimately by humans at the end point. Okay, I think the only thing that will make a difference here is both litter picking and litter education. I'm going to move on now just to the human impact and how COVID has really had a negative influence over litter and our natural environment as well. Okay, so the pandemic influence. It's already having a huge negative influence on our nature today. Not just that PPE has so many different facets, whether it's masks, whether it's plastic gloves, whether it's bottles of hand sanitizer that are being bought, the plastic production has increased as well as the pollution. Ultimately, it's not going anywhere. This is pollution that we're familiar with. We're familiar with these same types of plastics that have a lifespan of over 400 years or 450 in the cases of masks. And ultimately, this is something that needs to be eradicated before we let it even reach the ocean. Okay, the next point I wanted to make was just some data that we have from some of the litter pickers at the end of 2020. This was the last 6 months, and this is, I'm pretty sure this was just in the US that ICC was working, and they collected more than 100,000 PPE items over the coasts and waterways of the past 6 months. I don't think this figure truly quantifies how much PPE waste is really going into our environment, and it just takes walking around or looking out in your probably closest park to find at least some piece of PPE that has been littered. This has to stop. The pandemic is coming to an end, and the effects of it are going to be visible for generations and furthermore. It's something that we kind of all need to make a difference of. And the next point I'd like to make is just, is it our job to do so? This has been an ongoing debate for well beyond my period of time, and it's also something that I've experienced on a personal level, surprisingly. Going out and litter picking, I was extremely surprised from my experiences just from the past 2 months. The reactions that you receive from members of the public varies wildly, very wildly. It can go from people coming up to me and praising me and saying that I'm doing the Lord's work and kind of wanting to get involved, or those sort of positive responses, in comparison to being chastised or asked. There's somebody that's being paid to do this, the council, it's their job. There's a lot of different reactions you get as a litter picker, and I would argue that if you're doing it solo or with a group, stick to your guns and kind of like just reassess your personal position on it, which is something I'm about to do. So one of the key beliefs is that I didn't drop the litter, and therefore it's not my job to pick it up. And although this argument has grounding, and that in some ways it almost seems selfless doing something like litter picking, that is the nature of the activity. You're picking up litter that hasn't been, littered by yourself. You need to go out and do these sorts of things because ultimately us as a human race, it's all of our responsibility to start caring for and protecting our natural environment and protecting the planet. And all above, it makes sense to, and we need to. It's not a case of not wanting to anymore. I think people need to kind of bite the bullet and start making a difference in their surrounding areas. As I've mentioned previously, there is no other way to really tackle this. Okay, so it is all of our responsibility. And moving on, some arguments come from, is it your land? Are you allowed to be on this land? Are you allowed to be litter picking in the place that you're in? Ultimately, after doing some research and a lot of general and kind of like common sense, I think it's understandable that if it's your land and if it's private land, then it's also your responsibility to be looking and picking up the litter. That extends to accountability and the lack thereof. It may be someone's land, they may own the land, but there is no obligation that they have to go through and that they have to litter pick or keep it in any way appropriate for animals or our wildlife to live on it. And arguably this is something that should maybe introduced. There should be some kind of level of kind of a natural cleanliness that each area should be staying up to. We're not there yet, although I think it's something that could be proposed further down the line. And lastly, the council. So the council do have a budget, and they have quite a big budget. As I mentioned earlier, across the UK, there's over £1 billion that's spent yearly on litter picking. This isn't enough, as we can see. There will never be enough kind of means and ways to litter pick in everywhere or every way that needs to be done. It has to be taken on by us, the general public. We are the ones walking everywhere. We are the ones seeing litter and also littering. It has to come from a movement from the people and from a grassroots level to actually see some change. So following on from this, there are fines that can be given to people that that litter. I'm pretty sure that it starts from about £80, and if it gets taken through to court, it can extend to £2,500. However, the frequency that these are given, the likelihood that they would actually get through to that kind of like high stakes of a fine are really quite rare, and I don't think that they are either a big enough scare or not being used properly enough for it to actually prevent anybody from littering, because it's really made little to no difference. So it's our job, and it's time to do something about it. Okay, I've just got 3 photos on here. I just wanted to very quickly give a visual of the road directly in front of mine, and these are photos from the last litter pick that I was on. And I just wanted to highlight the blatant nature of the litter that is everywhere across the UK. It's not hidden, it's not necessarily unseen. There's sometimes it might be, but it's a lot of the time very blatant. And I think we as a populace turn a blind eye because it's simply not seen anymore. It's something that we walk past and we're used to seeing. And ultimately, we shouldn't be used to it. I just wanted to give a little bit of a highlight here. And there's a lot of work to be done. Okay, so what can I do? I would argue that tackling the problem of litter, the only thing we can really do that will really make a difference is litter picking. It makes sense. The two add up. I have been on far more solo litter picks than I have group litter picks. This is both due to COVID and both due to the fact that there aren't particularly many groups in Bedford or communities around here that litter pick. I would encourage, if there are any, then definitely get involved and get kind of like meeting up with similar-minded people. However, if you don't have the grace to do that, then it's not anything to kind of put you off. I think that solo litter picking is sometimes more productive than it is going to a group. You can pick things up as you see them. You don't need to go on a long litter pick for hours on end. When you walk around, if you see litter, pick it up or make a difference about it. The group litter picking obviously hasn't been going on because of COVID, and it will be commencing again as of the 21st of June if our roadmaps open up as planned. I wanted to highlight my personal opinions and the initiatives that I'm trying to push with Bedford and litter picking. And the notion is not restricted to Bedford, and it's actually the fact that we all need to, as I mentioned earlier, pick up litter and make a difference when we see it. It's about having 2 minutes to pick something up, put it in, not even 2 minutes, taking the time when you see something to make a little bit of a difference. That small act is something that if anybody in the current surroundings will see you do, will notice it, will make a difference. It's planting those seeds of curiosity. It's planting that seed of why did they make a difference? Why did they pick something up that they didn't have to? I think if everybody pushes this mentality, then the problem would be solved far quicker. I think the last point I had on group litter picks was just that although they're extremely important in making an impact in clearing our natural environment, I personally would argue that they are not the sole solution. And I would argue that the sole solution has to be accessible to everyone. It's not realistic for everybody to be able to meet up with a group at the same time, on the same day, every single month, and clear ultimately a similar area. I'm pushing an ideology of when you see litter, please pick it up. Make a difference and make small differences more frequently. That will change the scope and the perspective of people around you, and ultimately will create the biggest change. We need to tackle litter head on, and I think this is the way to do it. Okay, so I just wanted to do a quick recap here. I've got 4 main points, and the first, as I was just quite passionately stating, I'd like to reinstate. Pick up rubbish in your daily life. It's a powerful and necessary message. We need to start making a difference. If it's picking up 1 Snickers bar and you did that once a week, it would be more than you had ever done beforehand. It's always one more than you've ever done beforehand, and it's always an extra piece of rubbish that is not in a natural environment to harm or to hurt anything, or just kind of add to the microplastic problem. There's no negatives of picking it up. I'm also very, very passionate about the fact that if you see somebody else taking action against litter, it is something that will stick with you for the rest of the day. The first time I saw a litter picker doing it off of their own back, just walking around, is something that I still remember to this day and has inspired me to be where I am. Okay, the second point I'd like to make was continue to support what you believe in. You won't be able to pick up every piece of litter, and nobody will, but if you're pushing the message of sustainability or ecology in other small ways in your life, whether you buy a reusable water bottle, whether you decide that you're going to shop local this month instead of going somewhere else, all of these small changes will all start to have a knock-on effect. And being sustainable is about trying to push in that direction. Nobody's perfect with it. And I think it's really important to remember that all of these aspects can feed into every aspect of your life, and holistically they will make more of an impact. Okay, my third point. I've tried to be as uncontroversial as possible with this point, because I think it could potentially get uncomfortable in trying to have that conversation with people, especially strangers, which I've experienced myself, is trying to peacefully hold litterbugs accountable. Understandably, it's a difficult kind of topic to bring up. I also think that it's worth picking your fights, as some people may argue. I think that's very important about dealing with a group that you're comfortable with, and also being in a safe environment. I don't think it's important to verbally accost someone. I don't think it's important to embarrass or shame them. I think it's important to continue that education, to continue to pick up litter as you see it. If you see somebody litter, pick it up or ask them to politely. As I said, it's important to pick your fights here and not kind of like step on any toes that you feel would cause a scene that you wouldn't feel comfortable in. But I do think that education and continuing to show people that it isn't okay to litter, it isn't something that you should be doing, is also extremely important. And whether that's your friends, whether you're all at the park together and everybody decides to leave all their beers, if you're the person that starts to pick them up, somebody will probably come join you. And that kind of knock-on effect of making people aware of it, as soon as they realise, they usually do feel a slight sense of shame, and will kind of try, in my previous experience, will try to help in time. Okay, And the last point I had was simply spread the word. Do research, continue your own sustainable kind of journey. Make sure that you're educating yourself and continuing to educate yourself, but tell the people around you, tell the people that might not be online and able to watch this talk, whether it's the older generation, whether it's friends that you've got that simply aren't involved, let them know. Tell them why you think what you think, to have a conversation about it, justify your argument. I think spreading the word and talking about these conversations is always going to be a benefit, and I think it's something we should continue to do. So that wraps up my talk this afternoon. I now have some time for a Q&A if anybody has any questions. I would also like to note that we have some regular litter picks that are going to be starting in Bedford, so please keep an eye out on both Eventbrite and Facebook, and please feel free to reach out to me if there's anything that you've been interested in, or if you're in and around Bedford or the surrounding area and would like to connect. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hannah. So we've had a few questions in the chat. Let me just check. So this one is from Bryn in Bedford. I'd like to ask if Hannah thinks there should be harsher fines in place for people caught littering.
Harsher fines. I would argue that harsher fines could potentially kind of give people a little bit of a scare, or give people a bit of a shock to the fact that if they're littering, there actually is going to be a consequence, and it's going to be a consequence that could potentially be quite a hefty fine. I think on that front, I think it would be quite important to make them a little bit of something that would actually deter people, basically. I think we need a deterrent as well as education. So I think arguably a heftier fine could push people towards not littering, but I think that educating people as they are in that situation is probably more important than just finding them. Thank you though.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, I've got quite a few actually, Hannah. Thank you for it. I'm Alban MacDonald. I'm from the Sandy area, and over the Easter period, around about the Easter period, Lenten period, I took up a challenge, which was to walk 10,000 steps for water. It was a charitable event, but I actually walked some, well, probably about 5 miles to 10 miles every day for 40 days. And I tried to go in different areas across the area. And I went as far down as probably Hitchin into Bedford, and litter was strewn all over the place, absolutely all over the place, particularly along the hedgerows or the sides of roads. And I, like you, want to do something seriously about it. I also noticed lots of fly tipping taking place, which is just absolutely horrendous. And if I saw somebody doing it, I would have no hesitation in accosting them. I would take their photographs and I'd take videos and I'd send it off to the police with regards to prosecution. It's abhorrent. But I want to join a variety of things, and I'd like to do things to look along our roads and try and do things. Leighton Buzzard, the road to Leighton Buzzard from Dunstable, if you walk along that, it's just, there's so much rubbish, it's unbelievable, absolutely terrible. And you couldn't do it on your own. You'd walk about 100 yards and you would have packed about 3 packs of black bags. It's that bad. I spoke to the council about it, and they are prepared to give litter pickers and bags and things. So if people want to do that, that's fantastic. But
yeah, we do get a little bit of support from the local council. I think they can provide bags and rings, and as well as grabbers as well, which I think just pushes people towards not having to kind of source them themselves, which is just, yeah, a great initiative as well.
And I walked along rivers as well. So in the rivers, you can see bottles and all sorts, which have either been thrown into the river or probably floated in the river off the roads. And it's all over the place. It's destroying and I think it's got worse because I do walk a lot generally. And over the last year, it's just dreadful. So I think we need a concerted effort to try and get it highlighted and do something about it.
Definitely.
I'm all supporting it.
Good. Glad to hear it. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any other questions?
It's me. I'm just asked.
Hi there.
I'm Sue. I live in Flitwick. I know there are 3 litter picks booked from June onwards, which I'm hoping to join, but I am partially disabled. I can do either hold the bag or hold the stick while I'm pushing my walking trolley. So I need to be partnered up with someone. I've put the question out, never had an answer. But actually, again, in reply to Alban, those places that you've described are, from my observations, generally easier to get at. In the course of the pandemic, I have driven up to junction 16 and back just to charge my car battery. But at the end of my journey, I've been coming into Bedford to visit my stepdaughter. The stretch from the M1 junction, the 421, up until the Marston Mortain Forest exit is solidly strewn. The verge, the central reservation, I don't know about the road out of Bedford, this is coming into Bedford. I've never seen anything so disgusting in my life. And you can be sure that Mayor Dave will say, oh no, it's far too dangerous to send anybody out there. But the verge on the left side as you're coming into Bedford must be 20, 30 yards wide. It's solid. It's every inch of the hedge, every inch of the call it grass. I don't know if anybody else has spotted it, but I've never seen anything so vile in my life. Sorry, I've got no answer. Because they won't, I bet you, Mayor Dave wouldn't let anybody out. Oh, no, that's far too dangerous. But it's just people tossing stuff out of cars. You'll never catch them. You'll never catch. The only way is when they get envelopes with people's names and addresses, discarded envelopes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Sue. I know that some of the midsections for Highway England, you do have to get special permission if you need to go over there for litter picking. I think that the laybys are free to kind of go about, but as Alban mentioned, they are just absolutely strewn with litter, and I think that would take a big crew of people down there to actually make a difference. So hopefully that's something in the waiting, and I'm sure we can partner you up with somebody, Sue. That won't be a problem. But yeah. Thank you all very much, and yeah, appreciate you coming to my talk today.
Just before we do go, there was another question. This is from Andy. Andy asks, is this an educational or enforcement issue? And is a lack of pride in where we live also a factor?
I would argue that it's more of an educational than an enforcement issue, because I think that the enforcement of it ultimately is only a kind of a solution to an ongoing problem that isn't going to stop unless we educate the populace. I think that the education is the crux of what needs to be pushed so that there's a lack or a reduction in the amount of pollution that we're actually experiencing. I think it's just become quite prevalent, and actually littering's become more prevalent after the pandemic, which I think quite surprised me. And I think that's just due to masks and things like that being dropped. But I think that the pride in where you live is a huge factor. One thing that I've noticed particularly, even with Sue mentioning, for example, in Flitwick, and that there were quite, I think you mentioned that there were 3 litter picks that are kind of like due to happen. That's one thing I was very aware of as well. In the smaller towns, in the smaller kind of villages and stuff, there's a lot more pride. And I think it's because they are in and around it all day, every day. It's a lot harder to get that sort of pride, especially for example, in Bedford here. I think it's generally not felt or loved as much in town by the people that live here as potentially you would get in Flitwick. And that disconnect, I think, is causing a higher amount of pollution and litter in the town centres. I think places either have quite a severe problem in the town centre, or it really doesn't seem to be apparent at all, which in my opinion is directly linked to the pride factor. Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you.
Brilliant. I think that's everything. So let me just share this presentation. So a massive thank you to those who attended today. As you know, this week is Bedford Sustainability Week. We have 11 events taking place. Tomorrow you can book onto these ones. We have one on reducing food waste, learning to love the parts that others throw out. That will be with Claire from Delicious and Real. And then Oliver Rubenstein will be back, and he'll be doing a talk about meat, dairy and climate change from a local perspective. The registration for this closes tonight at 11:59 p.m, so do book on if you can. Also, some of the other events we've got during this week, we've got one on home composting, the climate crisis and some solutions, and then also we've got another one on food waste on Sunday. There are two ways to book. You can head to Eventbrite and search for Sustainable Bedford, or even the event title you're looking for, or you can head to the Sustainable Bedford Facebook, Instagram or Twitter pages. Instagram will have a link in our bio. If you've got any further questions or feedback, then please do email me through sustainablebedford@gmail.com. And as mentioned before, all links and everything will be sent to you in the next week or so. So thank you very much.
Thank you.